All right, today we're going to dive into a story that really gets to the heart of what makes a family tick. It's all about how, when things get really tough, a kid's kind of wacky attempt to help can accidentally become the one thing that saves everybody. So that's the big question we're looking at. Can a kid's mistakes, their biggest blunders, actually turn into their family's greatest strength? We're going to see this whole thing play out through the eyes of a little girl named Ramona Quimby as her family's world gets completely turned upside down. You know how every family has its own rhythm, right? A sense of what's normal? Well, for the Quimbys, that rhythm just gets shattered when Ramona's dad, Robert, loses his job out of the blue. And that one single event, it sends a shockwave through the entire house and sets the stage for, well, for everything that happens next. This really puts you right in Ramona's shoes. As a second grader, her logic is simple. Dad's home. This should mean playtime, fun, all the good stuff. But the reality is so different. The house is suddenly filled with this heavy tension, the smell of cigarette smoke, and her dad is stressed out, staring at job listings. The gap between what she expected and what's actually happening is just huge. So Ramona knows something is seriously wrong. She can feel the unhappiness in the air. But, she's a kid, so she completely misdiagnoses the problem. She sees this really scary anti-smoking commercial on TV and decides that's the real villain. Not unemployment, but her dad's cigarettes. And just like that, her big crusade begins. And her campaign just escalates with this relentless, only a kid would think of this logic. It starts small, with these little notes she hides in his cigarette packs. But pretty soon, she gets her sister Beezus involved, and they're drawing these intense skull and crossbones posters. Her whole goal is to save her dad, but all she's really doing is pushing him further and further away. And this is where it all comes crashing down. Her dad, who's already under so much pressure he can barely handle it, he finally snaps. All her efforts, which came from a good place, just ended up piling more stress onto an impossible situation. For Ramona, this is just crushing. She was trying to be the hero, and instead, she feels like she's the one who broke her family. Now, all that stress and anxiety, it doesn't just stay locked up inside the Quimby house. Nope, it follows Ramona everywhere she goes, seeping into every single part of her life, especially school. This feeling she has of being a nuisance at home starts to become a who she thinks she is. That weight of feeling misunderstood and ignored, it doesn't just vanish when she gets to school. It sticks to her, and it starts to affect how she sees herself and how she acts out. And pretty soon, all that internal chaos starts to show up on the outside. Since she feels like a bad kid, she decides she might as well look the part. So she makes this crown out of prickly burrs to become the baddest witch in the world. It's literally a physical symbol of how tangled up she feels inside. Of course, the crown gets hopelessly stuck, and it all ends with this painful, patchy haircut that leaves her looking just as messy as she feels. But just when it feels like things can't get any worse, the story takes a turn. The annual school Christmas pageant is here, and this one event, it's going to change everything for Ramona and her family. And Ramona is just so disappointed with her role. She's a sheep. In her mind, that is the most boring, useless part you could possibly get. The sheep just stand there in itchy costumes. For a kid who is desperate for some positive attention, this feels like one more failure. So this is the big question, right? The pageant is falling apart, the audience is getting bored. How in the world could a sheep, a character with no lines and nothing to do, possibly become the star of the show? Okay, let's just walk through this amazing moment. The pageant grinds to a total halt because the three wise persons miss their cue. It's getting really awkward. But then Ramona looks out into the crowd and sees her parents, and their faces are just filled with worry. And in that one instant, something clicks. She decides she's got to liven things up. So she starts to wiggle and scratch in her super itchy costume, and then the other sheep join in, and the reaction is just electric. The audience doesn't see a disaster, they see a hilarious comedy bit. The whole place just erupts in laughter, and just like that, Ramona is the hero. So this one single act of just spontaneous, joyful fun, it becomes the turning point for everyone. It was never about fixing the pageant, it was about fixing her family's spirit. And really, this is what resilience is all about, isn't it? Ramona couldn't get her dad a job, she couldn't fix their money problems, but what she gave them was something maybe even more valuable, a release. She reminded them how to laugh together, and that gave them back the toughness they needed to face everything else.
And all of this leads to a new beginning. It's not perfect, but it's hopeful. The money situation gets a little better when her dad gets a part-time job, and touched by what she did, he promises he's going to try to quit smoking. Their problems aren't all magically gone, but the whole feeling in the house has changed. They're a team again, they're connected, and they're hopeful about the future.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. This story really shows that sometimes the answer to our biggest problems isn't some logical, practical solution. Sometimes it's just a shared moment of joy, a silly dance, an unexpected laugh. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In your own life, when things are really at their worst, what's the one thing that truly brings your family together?